Hey friends, Wizards of the Coast has just revealed that Transformers are coming to Magic the Gathering through a special set of Universes Beyond cards that you can open up in the Brothers War set and collector boosters. So as always, we're going to go through some first impressions of the brand new cards and my first thoughts on how you can build around them. But before we begin, two quick reminders. First, if you like this sort of content, be sure to like and subscribe. And number two, if you want to pre-order these brand new cards coming in Brothers War, you can head on over to our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish, and be sure to ask for a scoop sticker in the order notes. So like I said, all these brand new Transformer cards are going to be in the Brothers War set and collector boosters. And while they're not standard legal, they are going to be eternal legal, so you can play them in Commander. Each card features a character from the franchise and is depicted as a legendary artifact creature robot, and all of them are double-sided. And they come in regular frames and a special showcase frame, as you can see on the side here. Optimus Prime Hero on the left side, you can see the regular frame, and on the right side is the shattered frame that is exclusive to the Transformers cards. Each of these cards are double-sided, but they are not transform cards. They will start on the battlefield on either side, and you're going to be highly encouraged to be flipping back and forth between them. And this captures the flavor of Transformers, where they're constantly shifting back and forth from their humanoid and vehicle forms. Each of these cards have the new keyword more than meets the eye, where you can either play them for their front side, their robot form, or their back side, their vehicle form. So for example, for Optimus Prime Hero, you can either pay 6 mana to cast him for his robot form, or you can cast him for 5 mana to put him onto the battlefield as a vehicle on the backside. And the term they use to flip from the front side to the backside is the term convert, which is brand new to the Transformers cards, as opposed to flipping or transforming. Alright, with that out of the way, let's look at the cards themselves. First up, Optimus Prime Hero. This is a 6-mana Jeskai 4/8 legendary artifact creature robot with more than meets the eye of 5, so you can pay 1 less to cast it on the backside. And it also has, at the beginning of each end step, bolster 1, so you choose a creature with the least toughness among creatures you control and put a +1/+1 counter on it. And when Optimus Prime dies, return to the battlefield converted under its owner's control. And the backside, Optimus Prime Autobot Leader says that it's a legendary artifact vehicle, 6/8, and living metal. As long as it's your turn, this vehicle is also a creature. So this vehicle does not have a crew ability, it's just always going to be a creature on your turn, and not going to be a creature on your opponent's turns. It also has trample, and whenever you attack, bolster 2. The chosen creature gains trample until end of turn, and when that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, convert Optimus Prime. So the front side is a lot more tantalizing than the back side. Being able to bolster 1 every single end step, not just your own, means you're going to be distributing a lot of +1/+1 counters and growing your army very quickly. And it has this sweet built-in resiliency to removals that whenever it dies, is just going to come back on its vehicle form, and it can either flip itself back over to its front side, the robot form, or just help boost another creature to flip it over even faster. So I like this card. It's actually pretty solid. 6 mana is a lot for a commander these days. However, the built-in resiliency means Optimus Prime is going to stick around on the battlefield more often than not. And it's going to be pretty hard to get him off the battlefield. So you usually only have to cast him once or twice per game, and he's going to stick around for most of it. And bolster is a fun mechanic. It's a great way to distribute +1/+1 counters and build a deck around +1/+1 counters. It's a very efficient way of doing this. So what do I expect to do with Optimus Prime? I think he's a great leader for a new Jeskai style +1/+1 counter decks. Usually you see +1/+1 counter decks in green-based decks. Almost all of them that I could find are green-based. So this is an interesting take on doing a non-green +1/+1 counter deck. There's a lot of just random support cards for +1/+1 counters, even outside of green. Arcee Battle Squad is a great way to give all your modified creatures, which are creatures with +1/+1 counters in this case, an extra combat phase. Damning Verdict is an asymmetrical board wipe for +1/+1 counters. Herald of Secret Streams is a great way to give your +1/+1 counter creatures unblockable. Sanctuary Warden is a great way of making tokens and also drawing cards in the same way. So yeah, Jeskai +1/+1 counters. This is a really cool way of doing it, and I think Optimus Prime is a legit commander for it as well. Next up, we got Megatron Tyrant. This is a 6 mana Mardu 7/5 legendary artifact creature robot. More than meets the eye of 4, so it costs 2 less if you want to play it on the vehicle side first. And your opponents can't cast spells during combat. At the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may convert Megatron. If you do, add 1 colorless mana for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. And the backside is a 4/5 vehicle with living metal. Whenever Megatron attacks, you may sacrifice another artifact. When you do, Megatron deals damage equal to the sacrifice artifact's mana value to target creature. If excess damage would be dealt to that creature this way, instead that damage is dealt to that creature's controller and you convert Megatron. So this Megatron is very sweet. It's essentially Mardu Artifact Aristocrats. The vehicle side is basically repeat removal. You're going to be sacrificing artifacts to take out opposing creatures, dealing excess damage to your opponent's faces, and then converting Megatron over to the robot side and immediately generating mana off the excess damage you're doing and flipping him back to the vehicle side and dealing even more damage by sacrificing more artifacts. So yeah, both sides really build upon each other and have really good inherent synergy, and it's a really good basis for a Mardu Artifact Aristocrat style deck. So what I expect to do with Megatron is basically run a bunch of artifacts that have high mana values and also want to be sacrificed for value. So for example, Spine of Ish-Sa can deal 7 damage to a creature when you sacrifice it. It has an ETB, destroy target permanent, and when it is going to the graveyard, you return it back to hand so you can recast it later and sacrifice it again and blow up even more things yet again. Ancient Stone Idol can be cast for as low as 0 mana if you're being attacked by 10 creatures, or 10 creatures are attacking rather. And it's a 12/12 for 10 mana, so you can deal 10 damage when you sacrifice it to Megatron. And also when it dies, it leaves behind a sweet token creature with trample. Or we have Mycosynth Golem, which is affinity for artifacts, so it can cost either between 11 or 0 mana to cast, and you just throw this at somebody and do 11 to somebody's face. And since this is Mardu artifacts, the giving artifact creatures affinity for artifacts is really beneficial too as a cost reducer. And then another card that is just good in this deck, since we have an artifact creature commander at the very least, we can run Alibu Ancient Witness for even more damage and even more scrying, and just it's just very good in a Megatron deck. It's just very good in basically any of these Transformer decks, to be honest. Moving on, we have Prowl, Stoic Strategist. This is a 4 mana white 3/3 legendary artifact creature robot. More than meets the eye of 3. So it costs 1 less if you want to play it on the vehicle side. And then whenever it attacks, exile up to 1 other target tapped creature or vehicle. For as long as that card remains exiled, its owner may play it. Whenever a player plays a card exiled with Prowl, you draw a card and convert Prowl. And then on the backside, it's a 2/3 vehicle, living metal, and whenever another creature or vehicle enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on Prowl. If this is the second time this ability has resolved this turn, convert Prowl. So the flexibility here is pretty nice. Either you're going to be temporarily exiling your opponent's creatures or your own creatures. You can exile your own creatures to take extra use out of enter the battlefield or leave the battlefield triggers, so it's kind of like a blink sort of strategy, but you're also temporarily inconveniencing your opponents by removing their higher cost creatures that you don't want on the battlefield or vehicles. So just constantly removing your opponent's commanders can slow them down very heavily, and then whenever they're casting or you're casting the spells from exile that have been exiled with Prowl, you're also drawing a card at the same time and growing Prowl in the process. So what I think we can do with Prowl, well, first, like I said, you can go for like a sort of blink strategy where you're trying to focus on just exiling your own creatures constantly to make use out of enter the battlefield and leave the battlefield triggers. And also it will help convert Prowl as well, because you need to cast 2 creatures or have 2 creatures enter the battlefield under your control. But the other way you could do it is you could just go all in on the fact that it's repeatable removal, and you can be really mean with it. For example, Drannith Magistrate says that if you exile something your opponents control, they can't cast it. That Drannith Magistrate will just straight up not allow it. Prowl also specifies that it has to be a tapped creature, so ways of tapping down creatures is going to be super beneficial as well. Blind Obedience and Thalia make sure that the opposing creatures enter the battlefield tapped, which makes them very easy to exile with Prowl. And Citadel's Siege is also another way to just repeatedly tap down things you want to exile with Prowl. Moving on though, we have Jetfire, Ingenious Scientist. This is a 5 mana blue 3/4 robot, more than meets the eye of 4, flying, and remove one or more +1/+1 counters among artifacts you control. Target player adds that much colorless mana. This mana can't be cast to cast non-artifact spells, and then you convert Jetfire. And then the backside, living metal, flying, 3/4, and you can pay triple blue to convert Jetfire, then adapt 3. And adapt 3 means if it has no +1/+1 counters on it, put 3 +1/+1 counters on it. So this is an interesting take on +1/+1 counters and artifacts. You can add artifacts onto Jetfire with his adaptability, convert it, hit somebody in the air for, 6 damage or something, then remove all the +1/+1 counters and add some ramp action going on. Or you can try to add counters on your other artifacts, maybe modular creatures, for example, and make ramp that way. It's interesting. It's a little bit weird. I don't know if it would be great as a mono blue deck, maybe as like a combo style engine, but this seems something that's better suited probably in the 99 of an artifact deck, just so you can have more colors that work a little bit better with +1/+1 counters. So as for what we're doing with it, Jetfire does combo off with Chromatic Orrery. With Chromatic Orrery, you can turn the colorless mana into colored mana, and Jetfire itself, whenever it adapts, it costs 3 blue to put 3 counters on it, and then you flip Jetfire over to the robot side, and you can remove those counters to make 3 colorless. With Chromatic Orrery, you can use that colorless mana into any colored mana you want, so you can use that triple blue to pay for its own adapt cost, so you can flip it back and forth infinite times, which doesn't really do anything by itself. However, if you add any way of adding additional counters throughout the process, such as hardened scales, which I know is in green, so you can't really do it as your commander. There might be some ways of doing it in mono blue itself, I don't really know. But if you have any ways of basically netting +1/+1 counters in the process, you can make infinite mana and grow Jetfire infinitely large. Another way you can take him is you can go like mono blue artifacts +1/+1 counters. There's not that many ways of doing that in mono blue. There's stuff like Steel Overseer, which is going to be fantastic to put counters on all your artifact creatures. You can always remove those counters to make mana with Jetfire. Kappa Cannoneer is another way of going artifact +1/+1 counter synergies. It's neat. I don't think it's particularly strong as a commander. I think it's more interesting a part of the 99 though. Moving on, we have Blitzwing, Cruel Tormentor. This is a 6 mana black, 6/5 robot, more than meets the eye of 4. And at the beginning of your end step, target opponent loses life equal to the life that player lost this turn. If no life was lost this way, convert Blitzwing. And the backside is a 3/5 vehicle, living metal. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose flying or indestructible at random. Blitzwing gains that ability until end of turn. Whenever Blitzwing deals combat damage to a player, convert it. So this is kind of just a beat stick, I guess. I don't know what you would really want to build around this other than perhaps a Voltron. The front side basically just doubles the amount of damage you're dealing to each of your opponents, and the back side is a somewhat interesting beater. I mean, a 3/5 indestructible is not that strong, I don't think, on the battlefield. Like, obviously it's sturdy, but it's going to be hard to get around your opponent's defenders. Flying is probably a little bit easier to get it to flip over to the front side, but the front side isn't that great either. It just doubles the damage. I don't know. I don't find this one particularly that exciting. If I did have to build around it though, I'd probably go Voltron. I'd just like slap a Loxodon Warhammer onto it, or a Sword of War and Peace actually is a sword that I don't like that much, but it does deal damage equal to the number of cards in an opponent's hand, and then Blitzwing will double that on the front side. So that was kind of cool. I don't know. I don't think this guy's really good though. Next up, we have my favorite Transformer, and the only one that I actually kind of know about because I watched Beast Wars growing up, and he made a quick little cameo in it, and I love the voice acting on this character. It's Starscream, Power Hungry. It's a 4 mana black, 2/3 legendary artifact creature robot, more than meets the eye of 3. Flying, and whenever you draw a card, if you're the monarch, target opponent loses 2 life. Whenever one or more creatures deal combat damage to you, convert Starscream. And the backside is a 2/3 vehicle, living metal, flying, menace, haste. Whenever Starscream deals combat damage to a player, if there is no monarch, that player becomes the monarch. Then whenever you become the monarch, convert Starscream. So basically the backside, give somebody the monarch so you can steal from the monarchy from him later. And then the front side is the big payoff. If you are the Monarch, whenever you're drawing cards, your opponents are losing tons of life. And then if you lose the Monarchy, boom, it turns back into a Flying Menace haste vehicle that can quickly steal it back for you. So it's a nice little 1-2 punch over here. I actually like this card a lot. It's very mana efficient for what it's doing, and I like the Monarch mechanic. I'm very biased that I love the Monarch mechanic, and I always love very playable Monarch cards because I like seeing them in Commander games. They just kind of get the game going forward, keep people proactive, take more risky attack steps and stuff. So I like this card a lot, and I think the abilities are actually really good here. The backside makes a lot of sense in stealing the Monarchy and providing the Monarchy to the game, and the front side it can be really strong. If you have ways of drawing lots of cards, you can make opponents lose tons of life in the process. So yeah, this card is really sweet. So what I expect to do with this card, as a commander, I think Fire Shrieker is going to be very good in this deck. The backside provides the Monarchy to the table. However, then you have to attack the person again to actually steal the Monarchy. Fire Shrieker, though, giving Starscream double strike means you can provide the Monarchy to the player you hit, and then immediately steal the Monarchy and convert Starscream over to that powerful front side ability. So that's really good. You can go Monarch Tribal. There's not a lot of payoffs in Mono Black, though. The two best ones that I could find were Court of Ambition and Custodial Lich. But you can also put Starscream in a multicolor deck like Queen Marchesa, which can focus on Monarchy as well and be very, very powerful with Starscream there just when you have more cards to work with. And then when you're on the front side of Starscream, things get really good if you can draw lots of cards. Like Peer from the Abyss lets you draw half your deck and lose half your life. If you're drawing like 30 or so cards more with Peer from the Abyss and you're on the front side of Starscream, you can distribute basically 60 life loss to your opponents. You can kill 1, 2, maybe 3 opponents all at once with Peer from the Abyss if you have the Monarchy and you're on the front side of Starscream. So that is going to be really spicy. I like Starscream as both a mono black commander, but also as part of the 99 of like a Queen Marchesa deck. Moving on, we have Slicer Hired Muscle, and I think this might be my favorite card of the entire Transformer set. This is a 5-mana red 3/4 legendary artifact creature robot, more than meets the eye of 3, double strike haste, and then at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, you may have that player gain control of Slicer until end of turn. If you do, untap Slicer, goad it, and it can't be sacrificed this turn. If you don't, convert it. And on the backside, it's a vehicle, 3/2 living metal, first strike haste, and whenever Slicer deals combat damage to a player, convert it at end of combat. So this card is all about the front side. It's all about basically handing Slicer around and letting your opponents kill each other with a 3/4 double strike creature. So it's indirectly winning you the game, as your opponents are just going around killing each other and dealing massive amounts of indirect damage for you with Slicer's ability. If you have an attack opening, you can play Slicer for 3 mana instead of 5 to basically just deal some damage and quickly convert it over to the front side. And then when you're on the front side, you're going to be having a ton of fun. Usually, you're not going to be saying no to passing around Slicer. There might be some situations where you do, but the front side is where all the fun is at. So what I expect to do with Slicer is just go full Voltron. You just run a bunch of equipment that either deal a lot of extra damage with Slicer, like Blackblade or Forge, or you protect Slicer so it's very hard for him to be either blocked or just dealt with a target removal with like Commander's Plate. And there's a bunch of cards that are going to actually benefit you and not actually the controller of Slicer at the time. Like Sword of the Animus says, when the ever equipped creature attack, you search your library for your basic land and put it onto the battlefield tab. It's not actually the controller of Slicer, it's the controller of the equipment. So Slicer can be some sick ramp with sort of the Animus equipped with it. And then there's some sweet spice options like Popular Entertainer, which says commander creatures you own and not control, have whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, go target creature that player controls. So basically you're allowing your opponents to goad each other and just spread the mayhem around as Slicer is dealing massive damage to all of them. I really like this card. I like just that political aspect of handing your commander over and watching it just pinball around the table and deal massive damage. So Slicer seems super fun for me. Next up, we have Arcee Sharpshooter, and either she doesn't have a showcase frame or Wizards of the Coast has just not shown it yet, but this is the only one that I found from the set so far that doesn't have a showcase frame. This is a 3-mana Boros 2/2 robot, more than meets the eye of 2 mana instead of 3, and then first strike, and it has an activated ability of pay 1, remove 1 or more +1/+1 counters from Arcee. It deals that much damage to target creature. Convert Arcee. And the backside is a 2/2 vehicle, Living Metal, and whenever you cast a spell that targets 1 or more creatures or vehicles you control, put that many +1/+1 counters on Arcee and convert Arcee. So the front side, remove +1/+1 counters and deal damage, so repeatable removal effect if you have counters on her. And then the backside is a way of adding counters on her in a very special way when you basically just want spells that target your own creatures. So kind of like a heroic style mechanic commander. Now an easy comparison to make to Arcee is Feather the Redeemed, which is another Boros 3-drop that also cares about targeting your own creatures with instants or sorceries. Feather is way more powerful and way more linear and oppressive than Arcee ever will be. So if you're looking for a highly toned down Feather for a more low powered table, maybe Arcee could be what you're looking for. You can run cards like Arm the Cathars, which target up to 3 creatures you control, which means 3 +1/+1 counters onto Arcee, or you can do stuff like add counters to her with Angel Fire Ignition, give her Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, and Indestructible, and then also start pinging your opponent's creatures and gaining life in the process. That can happen. I don't think Arcee is very strong though, so if you want something low power, I think this might be good for you, but personally, I'm not too excited about her. Moving on though, we have Blaster Combat DJ, 5 mana Gruul 3/3 robot, more than meets the eye of 3 mana. Other non-token artifact creatures and vehicles you control have modular 1, and whenever you put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on Blaster, convert it. And the backside is Blaster Morale Booster, which is actually not a vehicle, which is, I think, the first out of the entire set of cards so far. It has modular 3, and I guess I should tell you guys what modular is. Modular cards enter the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on them equal to their modular number. So modular 1 would mean you enter with 1, modular 3 means you enter with 3. And then when they die, you may put their +1/+1 counters on target artifact creature. So if you cast Blaster for its backside, more than meets the eye of 3, it will enter the battlefield as a legendary artifact with 3 +1/+1 counters on it, and you can pay X, tap Blaster, and move X +1/+1 counters from Blaster onto another target artifact. That artifact gains haste until end of turn. If Blaster has no +1/+1 counters on it, convert it, activate only as a sorcery. So this is kind of neat. It's essentially +1/+1 counters specifically for artifact creatures and vehicle decks, which is a subcategory of +1/+1 counters for Gruul decks you don't really get to see. I don't particularly find this too interesting for me, but I appreciate the fact that this is just opening up a new design space, a little subspace in the +1/+1 counter theme to make it a little bit more interesting. I don't think this card is particularly that strong, but it seems alright. So what I would do with it, I would just run, your typical +1/+1 counter theme cards. Invigorating Hot Springs, give all your stuff haste. Silk Guard is a great way to give all your stuff hexproof and also add more counters onto them. Rishgor adds more counters on them and turns them all into mana dorks. Kodama of the West Tree also allows you to turn all your +1/+1 counter creatures into ramp engines. So that's all good. I don't know. It's not the archetype that I'm most excited about though. Moving on, we have Cyclonus the Saboteur. This is a 4 mana Dimir 2/5 legendary artifact creature robot, more than meets the eye of 7. So this time, the backside, the vehicle side, is actually way more expensive than the front side. It has flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it connives. Then, if Cyclonus' power is 5 or greater, convert it. And connive means to have a creature connive, draw a card, then discard a card. If you discarded a non-land card, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And then the backside, Cyclonus Cybertronian Fighter is a 5/5 legendary artifact vehicle, living metal, flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, convert it. If you do, there is an additional beginning phase after this phase, and a beginning phase includes the untap, upkeep, and draw steps. So you get to untap all your permanents, number 1. If you have any upkeep triggers, then you get another one of those, and then you get to draw another card. So that's actually incredibly powerful. So the front side is not the side that you're very interested in, it's the back side. The back side is, the payoff is really, really good. Whenever you're dealing combat damage, you get to take another beginning phase. That's fantastic. So you want to get to that side as quickly as possible, as consistently as possible, to really take advantage of that combat trigger. So first and foremost, if you're playing Cyclonus, you really want to give him haste and also protection. So Lightning Greaves is going to be fantastic here. It's all about combat triggers, right? It's the front side is conniving, the back side is trying to get an extra beginning phase. So Lightning Greaves is going to make sure that you're going to get that combat phase the turn you cast him. Secondly, you can also double up on upkeep triggers that are very powerful, like Twilight Prophet, letting you draw a card and make your opponents lose life and gain life every single upkeep. Blackblade Reforged and Hammer of Nazan are both ways to help get Cyclonus up to that sweet spot of 5 or more power. Blackblade Reforged obviously does this by itself very easily and can also help you deal commander damage, which is very lethal. Hammer Nazan only gives it +2/+0, which is not enough to immediately flip it without conniving. However, it does give Cyclonus indestructible and opens up the opportunity to equip other stuff onto it for very cheap, so you can go for a Voltron rune. So I expect Cyclonus to be, by default, usually a commander, and probably going to be going a Voltron route. However, he's also pretty solid in the 99. I can see him really good in Rafine, for example, as a fellow conniver. And yeah, I think this card is just super sweet. Moving on, we have Flamewar Brash Veteran. This is a 3-mana Rakdos 3/2 legendary artifact creature robot, more than meets the eye of 2, and sacrifice another artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Flamewar and convert it, activate only as a sorcery, and you can also pay 1 and discard your hand, put all exile cards you own with intel counters on them into your hand. Now, what are intel counters, you ask? Well, the backside provides the answer. Flamewar Streetwise Operative is a 2/1 legendary artifact creature vehicle, living metal, menace, and death touch, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, exile that many cards from the top of your library face down, put an intel counter on each of them, convert Flamewar. So the backside lets you exile cards from the top of your library face down with intel counters, and then the front side lets you get those exiled cards into your hands. So it's a 2-step process for card advantage, and actually a lot of card advantage for a very mana efficient rate. So Flamewar does a lot of things actually. It's both a artifact aristocrat style deck. You need to sacrifice artifacts just to convert it over to its vehicle side. It also deals with exile because you're exiling the top cards of your library. You're not casting them from exile, unlike like say Prosper or whatever, but you are exiling them, and then you're basically replacing your hand with the exiled cards with Flamewar's ability of discarding your hand and just replacing them with the cards that were exiled with intel counters on them. So it's card advantage, it's a discard outlet, and it's also an artifact sacrifice outlet all in one. And it does everything in a very... It's either a 2-mana or a 3-mana creature. And its activated ability costs either 0 mana or just 1 mana. So yeah, this card's really gas. This card is very good. Now, what I expect to do with it? Well, a couple things. First, the vehicle side is just a 2/1. It starts as a 2/1. It's very small. It's going to need some help getting in there for damage, so you can start exiling cards with intel counters and start refilling your hand later on. So cards like Whisper Silk Cloak is going to be invaluable because it protects Flamewar, but also gives it unblockable. Any way of also increasing Flamewar's damage means the more stuff you get to exile with it. So if you have like a Blackblade Reforged, I know I mentioned that card a billion times, but any way of just increasing the amount of damage you're doing means you're going to be drawing more cards or exiling more cards with Flamewar's ability. You can also go for like an Exile Matters thing. Again, you're not casting stuff from exile, so you're a little bit more limited on what payoff cards you have, but stuff like Lelia Blade Reforged only cares about the fact that you're exiling cards. So it's actually works just fine there. And then you can also run a artifact style deck with stuff that you want to sacrifice, like Ichor Wellspring will draw your card when you sacrifice it, or Mirror Retriever will go and retrieve an artifact from your graveyard when you sacrifice it. So yeah, this card is really interesting, and it's going to be a really cool commander, I think. And now we get to the final card from the set, Goldbug, Humanity's Ally. This is a 3-mana Azorius 3/3 legendary artifact creature robot, more than meets the eye for 2, and prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to attacking humans you control. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, convert Goldbug. And the backside, Goldbug, Scrappy Scout is a 1/3 legendary artifact vehicle, living metal, human spells you control can't be countered, and whenever Goldbug in at least one human attack, draw a card and convert Goldbug. So unlike most of the Transformers that care about artifacts, Goldbug very much specifically cares about humans. So it actually wants you to build a human tribal list around it, and it goes in Azorius colors, whereas most times human tribal is going to be white and green. So adding blue to white is interesting. It does cut you off on a lot of like the green support cards, obviously, so I wouldn't say it's better than Selesnya options, but it is a unique take, and I applaud Wizards of the Coast for exploring human tribal in a color combination that you haven't really seen before. So what do I expect to do with Goldbug? Well, either ways of making sure the Goldbug actually survives combat is going to be really good, because it's attacking as a 1/3, so obviously there's not going to be... So obviously Goldbug is going to need some help actually surviving, so Odric Master Tactician is one way of making sure Goldbug is not just going to be dying to blockers. And also Bastion Protector is another way, giving it indestructible so it doesn't die that way either. And then for the most part, you just want to fill the deck with human tribal. Most of the human tribal cards are going to be in whites, like Angel of Glory's Rise for mastery animation for your creatures. But there are some blue cards that care about human tribal, one being Mass Appeal. 3 mana, draw a card for each human you control. It's a really good rate. So yeah, those are all the Transformers cards that you're going to be finding in the Brothers War. You're going to find them in the set boosters and the collector boosters. I hope you enjoyed these rundown of these cards. I am fighting off a pretty massive cold, so I apologize for sounding like doo-doo during this presentation. And as for these cards in general, I think all of them are really cool mechanically. I still don't like Universes Beyond, I'll be honest, and I don't like seeing them in a main set especially. So that's kind of meh, but I do think the cards themselves are really cool. I really wish that Wizards of the Coast are going to show us some in-universe versions of these cards too. I don't think they will, but you know, here's hoping that maybe they change their mind in the future. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of content, and we'll be back really soon with other Commander stuff on the channel. I'm really tired, so I'm going to go to bed, and see ya!